Hey friends, this episode discusses and shows images of mummified human remains. Of course, because we are talking about them archaeologically, they will be handled in a very strictly respectful academic way. But if you do not want to see any human remains, please go watch a different video. Cheese. We all love it. Some of us, to our detriment. Lactose girlies, I'm looking at you. It's proposed that cheese has been a staple part of our human diet since 8000 BCE, when sheep first became domesticated. Archaeologically speaking, cheese making has been inferred in Northern Europe from around the 6th millennium BCE, and the ancient Egyptians and Mesopotamians were eating cheese from the 3rd millennium BCE. Ever since then, the relationship between man and cheese, with their casmorphins that attach to the opioid receptors of our brains, has indeed been no fair-weather love affair. So it should come as no surprise that 3,800 years ago, we were burying our dead with hunks of it strung around their necks. In the late 1990s, archaeologists working in the Tarim Basin in the middle of the Xinjiang region of China uncovered hundreds of boat-shaped burials dating back to the Bronze Age. More specifically, from around 1800 BCE until the 1st century BCE. These individuals have enormous importance for the study of Eurasian prehistory. The individuals uncovered in these burials were so well preserved, not from any human interaction like we see with the mummified remains of ancient Egypt, but rather they were naturally desiccated due to the saline soil and the aridity of the environment. The Tarim Basin also has extremely cold winters, which greatly helped in slowing the decomposition of human remains. The mummies were found in cemeteries that were located along the southern and eastern edges of the Taklamakan Desert, one of the world's largest and driest deserts for that matter, that sits in the center of the Tarim Basin. I'm going to do a whole video this year about the finds throughout the Tarim Basin because it's just absolutely fascinating, but for the purposes of this video, don't forget we're talking about cheese today, not mummies. We'll be focusing on finds from the site of Xiaohe. But for brief context, the Tarim Basin is one of the most remote and least populated places on Earth. Though from the Bronze Age, starting around 2000 BCE, it was a key region for interaction between Western and Eastern Eurasia. When researchers opened the wooden vessels in which these bodies were buried, the human remains inside were wrapped in cloth bundles and wearing felt hats and wool garments. They had ghostly white faces, and some even had cauliflower-like yellowish lumps strung around their necks. It turns out that these lumps were actually cheese. Yes, people were buried with cheese necklaces. In a study published in the journal Cell last year, paleogeneticist Xiaohe Fu from the Chinese Academy of Sciences in Beijing was able to sequence bacterial DNA from the chunks around the necks of the mummies, which, it turns out, were made of the same white paste material covering their faces and necks. Turns out it's the oldest cheese DNA in the world. Yes, ma'am, these are the oldest cheese samples ever found, dating from around 3,600 to 3,400 years ago. Back in 2018, a study was published on cheese found in ancient Egypt, but that proved only to be 3,200 years old. It's a real close race here for the oldest cheese ever discovered. I'm actually quite excited to see who's going to be next as a contender. Within the samples that were studied, Fu recovered strains of Lactobacillus caeferanofasciens and Lactobacillus helveticus, bacteria which are still found in modern kefir, the fermented dairy drink that is sweeping health food aisles and even my own fridge as one of the latest gut-friendly superfoods. Kefir can be drained to make a kind of soft cheese and is produced across both Europe and Asia. Taking samples from 3,500-year-old cheese is no easy feat, especially because, as with most historical artifacts, you're restricted to only taking small samples for the sake of the preservation of the object or subject. DNA also degrades over time, and all that is left after thousands of years is just tiny fragments that have been mixed with other genetic information from being exposed to the environment. Fu began work on this project back in 2014, designing special molecules that could capture the ancient DNA. Finally, 10 years later, the genome compiled is 92% complete. This is a big deal because although scientists have been able to sequence bacteria from the gut microbiome of ancient people, This is the first time that they've gotten this kind of genetic data from an artifact. This could mean huge things in the development of ancient DNA research, as well as open so many doors in terms of what we can learn about biological remains from archaeological excavations. From this DNA, the team could then explore the history of how this cheese was made and how the production of it spread. Similar to how we make yogurt, kefir starts with a culture where you use a piece of existing kefir with its plentiful concentrated bacterial colonies and put it into the milk in order to start the fermentation process and make more. Gut health is one of the largest wellness trends in the last few years. It seems you can't go anywhere anymore without hearing something about healing or feeding your gut. Well, it turns out that eating fermented foods allows humans to actively shape the bacteria in our gut, and the authors of this paper say that it may be one of our most ancient and influential, yet underappreciated practices. Microbes in fermented food can be 10,000 times higher than fresh food, and consuming fermented products like some lactobacillus species are linked to health benefits in the gut. Ancient people clearly knew what was up with how to nourish their bodies. It also helps that fermented foods last longer and keep better in harsh environments. Turns out that sometimes looking back on how we've done things for thousands of years can be extremely helpful to us modern humans looking to optimize our health. That doesn't mean don't get vaccines or anything like that, though, please. Science and modern medicine are also very, very important. Anyways, back to the cheese. The lumps found around the necks of the Tarim Basin individuals were probably then kefir starter grains, a gift to take into the afterlife and stay nourished. Studies on 5 individuals from the site of Xiaohe in 2021 show strong evidence of milk proteins in their dental calculus, meaning they probably had a heavy reliance on dairy pastoralism alongside hunting and farming. Kefir cheese appears to have been just one ingredient in quite a varied diet for the Xiaohe people. They also ate wheat from Western Asia, millet grain from eastern China, and medicinal plants that originated hundreds of kilometers away from Xiaohe. Now that this DNA was sequenced, researchers then compared this cheese with that of others in its family tree to track the spread of kefir. 2 main clades were identified, with the kefir strains from Xiaohe Cemetery being related to strains from those in Tibet, and some from East Asia. There is another strain or branch of this tree that originates from Europe and the Pacific Islands, just so we're all up to date on the latest cheese knowledge. It was previously proposed that kefir spread from the northern Caucasus in modern-day Russia out to other parts of Europe and then further out. But the cheese found in Xiaohe, which is not from the Russian dispersal branch of this type of cheese, appears to have been earlier than that, which suggests that there was another dispersion route from around this area, possibly out to places in East Asia like Tibet. This means that there is the strong possibility of 2 distinct spreading routes of different subspecies of kefir cheese. Yimin Yang, a co-author of the study and a molecular archaeologist, has said that the people from the Xinjiang region, where the Tarim Basin is located, may have immigrated to Tibet, but more evidence is needed to confirm this. But the dispersal of this particular kefir clade also means that there were likely interactions and cross-regional exchanges between Bronze Age Xinjiang and Tibetan populations. Not to mention that the dispersal of people with said bacteria and kefir cheese also then shapes the evolution of said bacteria, which is a whole other scientific bit that we will not be getting into today. The milk that the kefir cheese was made from also shows that there was a level of interaction between various groups of ancient peoples. 2 samples of the cheese from the Tarim Basin mummies contained cow DNA, where another one had DNA from goats. The goat DNA was similar to that of other samples from Eurasia, which suggests that the milk that came from the goat kefir cheese sample is from a group of goats that were widely distributed and therefore probably means that there was a mixing of populations. In previous research, there have been signs for Bronze Age populations mixing with the peoples of the Xinjiang region, such as the Afanasiavo and Bactria margiana archaeological complex populations. So this new dairy research just adds further fuel to that potential fire. Just goes to show that even the smallest bits of archaeological evidence, like ancient fermented dairy dairy can serve as a way for scientists to track so many different facets of human culture and cultural activities, like, for example, interactions between Bronze Age populations, the domestication of animals for milk production, and the spread of fermenting techniques. As we can see from both their burials and from their teeth, kefir cheese appears to have been an important part of the Xiaohe culture, as well as other Bronze Age cultures because, drumroll please, they were lactose intolerant. Yup, Xiaohe populations were genetically lactose intolerant. But I know enough lactose intolerant people who refuse to give up cheese because it's just so damn good. Turns out we aren't that different from our Bronze Age ancestors. Loving cheese just seems to be a human trait. This is my favorite part of the entire study because it just proves that we have been addicted to cheese since its invention, really. The process of cheese making and fermenting decreases the lactose content significantly, which also then decreases any gut irritations or disturbances that are caused by lactose. Not to mention it extends shelf life, like we talked about earlier. It's a real win-win here for lactose intolerant Bronze Age populations. On top of the microbes that we already talked about in this video, there were even more found in this Tarim Basin mummy cheese, so there is the potential for the team to find further clues to past human movement and culture. This, combined with other biological samples that we are now able to study thanks to advances in archaeological science, means that we could reveal even more about interactions of Bronze Age societies, the spread of technology and goods, past human movements and behaviors, and the microbial evolution of the food that we eat today, not to mention how it got to be that way. At least we now know with pretty much 100% certainty that we as a species have always been obsessed with cheese. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you liked that video, you know what to do. Smash the like button, smash that subscribe button. Big thank you to all of my patrons over on Patreon. If you like the channel, you want to help support the channel, head on over to Patreon and become a patron. Just for fun, tell me what your favorite cheese is down in the comments below. I just want to get a sense for what cheese we're currently feeling. Is it Manchego? Is it Brie? Is it a good Camembert? Tell me what you think. As always, stay dirty, my friends.